Let me first of all wish you all a very good morning and a very good day. Our esteemed Professor B.V. Singh, Professor Tabir Kalam, my friend, organizers Mr. N.K. Singh, N.K. Mishra, Professor Rakesh Raman, Professor Padmini Ravindran, Dr. N.P. Singh, Dr. Lauji, esteemed Professor Kohl Sahab, my elder brother, I would say always, Professor Harikesh Singh ji, we know each other for a long period of time. Professor Tabir Kalam on the stage, invited guests, dear colleagues, Professor Meenakshi Khanna, and all our colleagues and students and support staff. Let me, before we break certain myths about the Indian environment and also about Islam, let me just give you certain tips first, initially to start with, because some of our students who may not be aware of these things, sometimes when we say a Muslim means combination of faith. And when we say Islam means the community of fellowship, a community that belongs to a single fellowship. There are lots of misrepresentations which we'll certainly deal with. We found that in 570, the great prophet was born. And between 610 to 622, Quran was revealed to him. Not as a document at that point of time. And then during the period of Khalifa Usman, from 644 to 656, Quran was revealed. What was the greatest message of Quran at that point of time? The greatest message, because today we find different communities battling different religions and battling each other's religion. The fundamental principle of Quran at that point of time was monotheism. Because there were scores of tribes in the Arab world. There was a lot of commerce going on even before the coming of Islam. If you read Warmington's book, which states how people from southern India were connected with the Arab world. When we say southern India, I don't mean deep south. I mean even Andhra Pradesh, there are references to these areas. How they were so well connected in spice trade with the Arabs, Romans, and Greeks from 2nd century BC, as far back. Because today we talk in terms of immensity of distance, and therefore we feel that perhaps people cannot reach to such distances, but distance was not a problem in ancient or medieval world at all. I would say distance is a problem in the modern world. So we had these connections at that point of time also. Prophet brought a couple of kgs of milk and some goat meat and gave the idea of monotheism. The fundamental principle of Islam, that we have only one God. I would like to mention to my friends here, both the Muslims and the Hindus, I would say, of India, if he wanted only one community, he would have said Rabbil Muslimin, but he said Rabbil Alameen. That God belongs to every community. He is universal God. He is super God. He is not belonging to a single community. This idea was opposed. One of his cousins immediately jumped and said, I am with you, when he gave the idea, because people were so much fed up with polytheism and other theistic ideas at that point of time, which he consolidated into monotheism. But soon we find that within Makkah there was opposition. Why there was opposition? Because Abu Sufyan, who was mayor of Makkah, he took it to heart because a lot of business was being done, and as a mayor, he was benefiting immensely. He became one of the greatest opponents of Islam as well as Muhammad for his personal reasons, not for religious reasons. Abu Sufyan's wife was Hinda, a Gujarati lady. Another proof how closely India was interacting with the Arab world. And this opposition began to spread, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be on his soul, had to migrate to Medina. After that, we find when during Caliph Usman's time, Quran appeared as a text, there were certain things which were not included at that point of time, and those principles continued to be disputed almost up to the end of 10th century AD. The various groups, began to struggle this idea of Islam at that point of time. There are followers of Islam who immediately accepted the idea, but there were heretics who did not violently oppose the idea, but they also opposed it in terms of emphasizing the mystic tendencies, the heretic tendencies. And then, of course, the Orthodox. So therefore, there's a triangular struggle going on. We have, from among the heretic tradition, which later becomes, when we say mystic or Sufism, there are so many other things. Indians say Adhyatmikta, Paramarth, similar, ideas. We find that it was Bayazid Bastami, who also opposed it later, when this trend of heretic tradition continued for a longer period of time. It was Al-Haj Mansur, who also opposed and was executed. By the time Bayazid Bastami appeared, Al-Haj Mansur appeared, or Rabia made her appearance as a mystic. By that time, Prophet had passed away after 62 years of age, in 632 AD. And therefore, Islam, from an individual's idea of monotheism, had transcended to a position of institution. Because now we find that those polytheists who opposed the, they also found that it was beneficial, they can get rid of rituals by joining Islam. We found agriculturists joining Islam and getting benefited. We also find urbanites, to preserve their commerce and commercial routes, their businesses, they also joined Islam. And when it transcended to an institution, it threw up opportunities for employment of administrators and people in army when it began to travel from place to place to place. Initially, we find that it was Northern Africa, it was Spain, it was Sicily, it was Mediterranean coast that accepted Islam and took Islam as a religion. You see, we have certain misgivings, which our Muslim brethren also have certain misgivings in Indian context. The misgivings are, we feel either that we are all from the Arab world, we have come here to spread Islam and therefore we are here. That's also version. We'll come to the Indian problems as well. But it's not like that. After this opposition began to dissolve, Quran was declared as a commercial language, a very, very important language for merchants. Therefore, whether you like the monotheistic idea or not, but your material compulsion is also there to accept Islam as a religion and go with your trade and so on. I'm really amazed, because we may have less time, but I am amazed, to see in this world, if there is, this is really good for economists. Professor Singh Saab is from economics department. There is no battle of ideologies in the world. There is no battle of communities in the world. The battle is only the idea of trade, right from day one. It's just the idea of trade that makes us fight. China with Russia, Russia with US, US with other countries, and so on. It's only how you progress and preserve your trading relationships and make money. Anyway, coming back to the Arab world, we find that people began increasingly to accept Islam in the Arab world, and sub-Saharan Africa, Mediterranean, as I said, Sicily, Spain, and Northern America. Beyond that, it did not make a mark as a religion up to almost 10th century, I would say, as a religious format. Because let me state it here itself, that when Islam began, when conquest of Persia took place, conquest of Central Asia took place by the Arabs, we medieval historians in India, I would really like to mention them. I have been debating this with Professor Irfan Habib Saab, with Professor Harbans Mukhia, with many other scholars who belong to, a non-Marxist genre also. The impression is that when Islam came from Central Asia, first I said that there is one impression is that it came from Arab world, and therefore we have all come from there. Those of us who consider ourselves as Muslims, true Muslims. Some of the scholars have impression that when Islam made its appearance from Central Asia, we all came, and that was a completely Islamic land. That's completely incorrect. Even I had a decade ago the same impression till I read lots of literature on Central Asia and Islam. Because when Arabs made their presence felt in the Central Asian world, there were Buddhists fighting with Shaivites, Buddhists fighting with Zoroastrians. There was intra-state and tribal warfare going on. Buddhists, Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, Mongols, shamans, Machinians, and many other tribal, cults who were fighting among themselves. You can imagine the condition of Central Asia was such that one of the king was caged and taken from village to village by Turks. So therefore, when Arabs entered Central Asia, they could not dissolve these conflicts. They could not en masse convert all these people at all. We have plentiful of literature on this aspect, that whatever wealth was also collected or plundered or gathered in Central Asia, that was deposited at Meru and at Samarkand, at Bukhara, the trading towns, the ancient trading towns. There's a Persian poet, Umar Khayyam, saying about describing the beauty of the ladies, and says the king can, greatest gift ever king can give you, he can give you a right over a trading town. Samarkando Bukhara. Agar Turki Shirazi Badasarad Dile Mara, Bakhalo Hindwash Baksham, Samarkando Bukhara. That even for a small till on your cheek, the king can give you the town of Bukhara, because it was so economically very rich. And therefore they deposited wealth there, but could not control and did not bring Central Asia under the control of Khalifa because of these battles which were happening. Because you must remember, I am talking of 8th century, 9th century, before 10th century AD, and you are all well aware of what was happening in your neighborhood, Bodh Gaya and other places. You have a look at G. Naidu's book on Buddhist Kashmir, which does refer to Kashmir less, but it's more on decline of Buddhism in India. And look at what in Hindi we can say Kathulogaratha Buddhists in India. How Buddhists were killed here, and they were also running away from here to China, from here to Central Asia, and there also battles were going on. There was a warfare going on. There was nothing of established Islam by 7th, 8th, 9th century, even 10th century also. Yes, there was Muslim presence. Muslims were visiting as soldiers, as traders, as merchants, trying to make attempts as deputies of Khalifa, but the progress was not coming forth at all. The progress only came when Turks began to take an initiative. The first thing Turks did was to recruit Persians. I am reminded of the modern conversions here. The modern conversions, in the sense, if you look at the book of G.A. Adi, Religious Conversions, which I am sure Professor Kohl Sahib has studied because it belongs to discipline of sociology. There are different articles on conversions, and it shows very clearly in South India, the person named Lakshmi Narayana, for example, becomes a Christian but does not change his name because he wants to be part of the community, but he does not want to be part of the religion. Because Lakshmi Narayan to the other members of community would appear as a Hindu's name. But when you go to his house, you find that there is an emblem of Christ. So therefore, they first made an attempt and converted a large number of Persians. There was also protest because Persian artists protested and cut their hands because they did not want art and music of Persia to be, sort of shelved as some of the orthodoxy believed. Here, I would also like to mention that when you look at one genre of historians, they all say before 13th century, including India, that before 13th century it was all Jahiliya. But if there are two people who have opposed that idea that it was not Jahiliya in this part of the world, in India or in Central Asia, in Persia, it was Abu Kayyan, in Iran, who opposed the idea. He said, no, we have a history. We are not part of the Jahiliya. We may accept Islam and be the part of Islamic community. But before coming of Islam, there was nothing like a Jahiliya in Central Asia, Persia. Similarly, here also in Indian context, we find Kayyan did it around 1517, Iran. And Abul Fazl was little earlier to him. He did it during Akbar's period of time. He also protested and said, he's stated very clearly in Ain Akbari that it is not, Jahiliya here. He also gave a new idea about it. Somehow we find with Turks, Islam made a great progress and began to enter into India, Afghanistan, Central Asia fully later, and various other regions of the world. Why did it make such a progress in India if there was a protest in other places? We'll come to the question of conversion later. But let me tell you at this moment here, if you look at from 5th, 6th century AD, go back to Vijayanagar Empire, go back to some of the southern kingdoms, then go back to the kingdoms in mainland India, go back to the kingdoms in Punjab and Kashmir. The word Turshuka is used for Turk, and it is very frequently used everywhere. If you look at the best army in India, it is made of Turshukas. In 7th, 8th century AD, we find during that period of time, when King Laltaditya was ruling in Kashmir, he sought help of Turshukas against the Chinese emperor. If you go to Vijayanagar, Vijayawada, Tamil Nadu, interiors even today, a Muslim is referred there as a Torka today. Just today, I am telling you, just today also they are referred as Torkas in Vijayawada and other areas. What I am saying is that Islam, the Turkish people had a great presence in entire India for a longer period of time. Not as Muslims, but as Turks. They had excelled in craftsmanship, in soldiery, in artisanry, in masonry, in gold cutting, mine cutting, building technology, and many other technologies. They had become really excellent. They had really a flash of brilliance in these arts. In Kashmir, we look at temple construction. There is a temple which is made of almost in Purana Adhisthana, Prandanathan, only one stone, bigger one. There also we find that it is Turks who have done that. No temple could be put, the gilt parasol on the temple roof ceiling cannot be put without the help of Turks. Such was the presence of Turks in India. Therefore, it is these Turks, not the Arabs, who brought us the version of Islam here. Now, what you find is that the Arab version of Islamic idea, except monotheism, gets little, mixed up with the ideas of Turks. And then we have the same version available here in Indian context. But where is the confusion created? The confusion is created because all of us are fed the version and opinion presented to us by the Europeans. We have great historians who worked on Islam like H.R. Gibb, for example, without any biases. He has done plentiful of work on early Islam. We have Thomas Arnold preaching of Islam. We have Ira Lepidus. His latest work has again appeared as Islamic Muslim Communities, and people should read that. It's a very bulky one, but it's one of the most authentic and best book ever produced, I tell you. But then, unfortunately, we have colonial masters, colonial historians, colonial adventurers who had intention behind their writings. They gave us a different version of conversions because they presented Muslim not only to India but in other places also as if the Muslim has come or Islam has come with a Quran in one hand and sword in the other hand. That if you don't accept Islam, I'll cut your neck and convert you forcibly. So the only option, as for colonial version of European historians, is that Islam was brought into India and other places only because of threat. And why did they want to do it? Why their interpretations are misinterpretations today? The fact is that basically in 11th century, when crusades took place, Europeans had long battles with Muslims. Christianity opposed Islam to the nail because the religions that were running parallel in the Arab world and European world to Islam, that was Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Jews. So therefore, when they come to India, they are confronted with the same enemy. There they were confronted because they were Muslims and it was religious battle. But when they come to India, here it's an economic battle, battle for trade, which is not a healthy sign. Because if you look at material dimension, even for trade also, it was not healthy. We have interesting material that when Muslims came and they could coexist with Christians, with some Jews, with Hindus in Kerala. That's an interesting case study. There was no battle between the two. Because Adi Shankara in his writings, when Adi Shankara was systematizing Upanishads and emphasizing the idea of one God, he was also influenced that there is something simmering in the world and people may turn towards one God. That's why he started consolidating these things to tell us that be aware and emphasized the idea of monotheism. So we find in Kerala, when Islam made its appearance, there was no battles at all. These battles started when Portuguese came to India and they began to oppose Muslims in India here. Not only on religious grounds, but on political grounds, because they became aware that by the time Portuguese come in late 14th, early 15th century into India, they begin to discover that in every state in India, Islam was blooming. Islam had made a great progress. As I said, that it had one transition after the Prophet when it was institutionalized. But it had second transition with the help of Turks who universalized those institutions. Sense of justice, idea of protection was the primary idea of Sultans of Delhi. Akbar believed in multi-ethnicity. I'm prepared to debate with scholars who say multiculturalism is like nationalism, a thesis of 18th, 19th century. I would rather take it little backwards and say that multiculturalism did exist and prevailed during the time of Akbar also. Because there was a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-regional society as well. And every religion had a freedom. And he would himself take part in Holi, in Deepavali, going to temple establishments, going to Sikh gurdwaras, going to other places. Equally, not that he was simply doing it as a politician, but he had a genuine concern for each religion, that each religion for a ruler is better and for the better stability of India and so on. So therefore, when Europeans came here, they were confronted with the same Islamic idea, the same enemy here. You can go to the extent and see some of the Christian scholars they have mentioned earlier in European context said that Prophet is a monster, that he is impostor. They demonized Prophet at that point of time when he was not alive, but he had given the idea of religion. But you must also remember the greatest historian and economist of France, Henry Pirenne. Henry Pirenne says that Charlemagne would not have become Charlemagne if I am pronouncing him correctly. He became Charlemagne because of Prophet, because of the spirit of Islam. This is what Henry Pirenne himself admits, because Henry Pirenne had no axe to grind like colonial historians. So this was basically the version of Europeans when they came to India. It helped them to redefine India's periodization so that they could prove themselves as forefathers, forerunners of modernity in Indian context. Everything that was bad was associated with Muslim. They said that this is the period of anarchy. With the coming of Muslims, anarchy has commenced in India, because until then, it was all golden age. So anarchy commenced for them with the idea of medievalism, and everything that was negative was piled on to Islam, and everything that was positive was sapped away from Islam by Europeans. That is how Islam made its appearance in Indian context. But we have studies by Sayyid Athar Abbas Rizvi, Professor Muhammad Habib, Irfan Habib, Khalik Ahmad Nizami. There are a number of scholars. The one esteemed scholar, Professor Zuddin Sahib, is here. Many others, in fact, who wrote, scores of them, Hindus, Muslims, and other scholars who wrote on Islam in Indian context. They gave their versions stating Islam came for the sake of, because Islam had the theory of masawa, because Islam brought into technology, because Islam brought in the idea of oneness. Likewise, they gave us number of reasons. Late Professor Muhibul Hassan, father of Mushir Hassan, who did early work on, Kashmir and Islam, on Sultanate period and so on, and many other essays, in fact. Muhammad Yasin, so many others who wrote on it. Everybody tried to give a positive answer where the question of violence was kept away, and stated that none of them committed violence. That it came very peacefully and voluntarily people accepted Islam. We do have some pieces of evidence, which do pertain to violence. But those things cannot be, they are not so much, they are not in bulk so that we can generalize. They are not sufficient material to generalize. Individual examples cannot be generalized to build the character of mass society in India. So therefore, their version was different. I give you a sample idea of how it came in Kashmir, for example, because the four important regions is Eastern Bengal, where Muslims made a good entrance and impact, Western Punjab, Malabar, and then Kashmir en masse, which became Muslim in 14th century. When we look at Kashmir, most of the scholarship, most of the scholarship is, you must remember that some of our this medieval, scholars, they have a different story to tell us. And I emphasize the point here that we need to study history and memory, because these people have frozen memories of Islam and frozen history of Islam. Persian and Sanskrit scholars. Frozen in the sense, they will keep on memorizing and repeating and putting fixtures on these arguments repeatedly. Let me give you a small example here. Minhajus Siraj is considered to be one of the founder fathers of Delhi Sultanate in terms of his writing. He wrote, Minhajus Siraj wrote one of the tariqs called Kamila Tawarik. Kamila Tawarik Minhaj states things, because they were hegemonizing the political capacity of Islam. Feeling proud that Islam, wherever some wrongdoing has been done, they would really appreciate that and really preserve it as a historical memory to show off the strength of Islam, which was a wrong thing, which modern Muslim society would not accept. That is how these negative aspects also got piled up with the Islam. In Kamila Tawarik, I was telling you, Minhajus Raj states, he says the day Prophet was born, the same day some of the temples fell down in sin. Can any scholar accept it? Because Prophet was not facilitating earthquake. He said, not only this much, he goes beyond a certain point. There cannot be, as per Islam, there cannot be second Rasul, second is Prophet at all. This idea was given by Alauddin Khilji also to Amir Khusro to project him as a prophet. He said, no, the idea of Islam would be disputed. I will not do that. He hesitated to. Then he said, make me at least Alexander. He said, even that cannot be done because you are a plunderer. So my idea is that how this fellow again hegemonized it. He said that some of the temples fell down in sin on the day when Prophet Muhammad was born. Not only this much, he said, do you know, Mahmud of Ghazna and Prophet Muhammad have the same horoscope. I mean, two cannot be compartmentalized together. Where is Prophet Muhammad and where you can keep a simple ruler, Mahmud of Ghazna, who himself admitted his wrongdoing at the end of his life? But Kamila Tawarik, it mentions that Prophet Muhammad and Mahmud of Ghazna have the same kind of horoscope. This is very sort of very strange thing that has happened to history because of the memory. In a similar way, this memory began to operate in Kashmir's context also. Let me give you one illustration. We have the first example in Kashmir. Who became the first Muslim in Kashmir? The reference is that it's a Buddhist, Rinchen, whose original Buddhist name was Bhatta Bhikshana, a Buddhist monk who became. And how did he become Muslim? The Muslim scholars, the Persian Muslim scholars say he became a Muslim because early morning he said, after the dream, that whosoever face I will see early morning, I'll accept his religion. If that was the tendency among Indians and Kashmiris, I think we would change our religions every day. And that's why Rinchana became a Muslim. The fact of the matter is that Bhatta Bhikshana turned towards a Shaivite priest when Buddhists were being killed and chased out of Kashmir. You mainland people have also given us a lot of trouble, I would say. One of the rulers who was a Huna ruler, Meherkula and Nara, they were chased out of rest of mainland, and he came and took a refuge in Kashmir, became Kashmir's ruler. If you read Kalhana's Rajdhani very carefully, Kalhana says that Meherkula said that I just don't want to see a Buddhist in entire North India. And he had killed thousands of them through his cronies, in rest of India also. Therefore, there was a great battle going on between Shaivites and Buddhists in Kashmir prior to coming of Islam. And under this pressure, when Bhatta Bhikshana and his group wanted to get converted, Devaswamin, who was the priest at that point of time in Kashmir, Shaivaita Acharya, he said no. He cannot be admitted into the order of Shaivism and Brahmanism and so on. In Hinduism, he cannot be admitted. He said, goodbye to you, I'll become a Muslim with the Turks. And he facilitated the Turks who were already present in Kashmir. Shahmir, the second person who became the ruler after the throne, after overthrow of the Hindu ruler Sohabata in Kashmir, was already working as a commander of forces. He was the chief commander of forces under Sohabata, under Sohadeva, the ruler later whom he killed and took reins of office in his hands and then facilitated. And Shahmir also did not go to home to tell people that you accept Islam. No. The topmost nobility of Kashmir at that point of time, Magres, Ranas, Dars, Kols, so many others who were there at that point of time. He married his 4 daughters into different families of this nobility. And when nobility was wooed by Shahmir, they all supported Shahmir. There's an idea being put up that so many temple destruction took place in Kashmir. Let me tell you another interesting truth about it. Sultan Sikandar, whose original name was Shankar and his mother's name was Shobha Devi, Hindu by origin, born out of a Muslim father. Muslim father in the sense Islam was not so, as I said, so well defined at that point of time, is referred as a Buddh Shikan, that he has destroyed lots of temples in Kashmir. Most of these structures which were destroyed were Buddhist structures, which were destroyed by many Shaivites. If you read Jonah Raja says, what happened to this fellow Sultan Buddh Sikandar? He has become a Harsha. He has become a Harsha. Harsha was the ruler who married his own sister, if you read Rajtarangi. He did not leave Sugatta Buddha of copper in Kashmir. He destroyed, coined that into money, destroyed many temples, because temples had also become centers of political intrigue at that point of time. But mind you, I do not deny that Sikandar did not destroy some of them. But I am giving you an example here. We have a religious place called, presently, the Kashmiri Pandits and others who come from outside, they call it Zeet Hair, that there's a goddess who stays there and therefore people go to pay reverence to the Zeet Hair. The place is a Buddhist originally, Zeshta Rudra. Those of you who have read Hyun Song very carefully, Hyun Song says that when I came to Zeshta Rudra, I had only come to learn Sanskrit for 15 days, but was amazed to see Kashmiris, not Pandits. He says Kashmiris because Pandit identity came much later. He said, I was amazed to see Kashmiris reciting Sanskrit in such a melodious voice that instead of 2 months, I stayed here for 2 years. And even that is less. He stayed in Zesh Rudra shrine for 2 years to learn Sanskrit when he was on way from China to rest of India and other places. So this version which is being presented by these Persian and Sanskrit scholars is not correct, in fact. There are certain gaps which we need to study when we study Indian Muslim. I can tell you there's a very, very interesting Persian saying. I have brought it so that I don't forget it, because after 60, there is always this danger. The first Persian Tawarikh, which was written by Sayyid Ali, Tariq Kashmir, I have the original manuscript copy with me, and I have read it plentiful times very carefully. Sayyid says, Har aankh se taafto oaz kufr dina, Khalifa beshak asta, in peshtana. Chunka se ayat ba Islam, sharf payat zimin nami mola. Sayyid Ali mentions that I'm openly appealing to public and telling them you will become as good as Khalifa if you accept Islam in Kashmir, openly inviting them that please come and join, we'll give you the status of Khalifa. That's what Sayyid Ali says. And interesting thing from the rural folk, Sayyidiri also says that when some of the people came from Central Asia who were facilitating the spread of Islam, they would go around with a little bit of copper or iron on which it was written Allah. And then when they would break the image of, say, Shiva or somebody else, there's a commotion when you put a final hammer on the pillar or something. When it breaks, there's a noise. And the fellow would come and say, look here, this iron has come out of it. There's written Allah. Though only name differs, because Allah means to Hindus also it's a God. He said in this also Allah is written, and many rural folk would turn towards it. The third important reason actually is that when we say rishis in Kashmir, the Kashmir is called, Kashmir is the Rishwar, that means it's the place of Sufis and mystics and rishis. These mosques where you see, if you go through the golden age of Persia, by Frey, I think M.N. Frey or so, I'm forgetting the initials, please excuse me for that, or N. Frey, golden age of Persia, you can check it on the net. Look at what happened to Buddhism and how monkhood started. For those of you who are interested in Sufism, you must study heretic tradition of Arab world, heretic tradition in Central Asia, and more particularly, monkhood in Central Asia. How gradually you find that everything emanated from Buddhism, this monkhood. And these rishis in Kashmir, they were spread all across the valley with a large amount of following. These rishis, their names have been changed multiple times. When Shaivites ruled, they gave them Hinduized names. When Islam came, they gave them Muslimized names. They added Sayyid or Shah. If it was Iranian, he would add Shah. If it was, say, Turk or so, he would add Sayyid. Sayyid Man Shah. When Hindus were there, it was Manak Rishi. When Buddhists were there, it was Man Buddha. How these things changed, and these are present within the Islamic community in India. If you look at our Kashmiri Muslims, for example, when they are praying every morning after the worship, my Muslim friends and brothers would certainly understand, when they are reciting Aurad, nowhere in the world, not even in India, Aurad is not recited in musical chores. But in Kashmir, it is recited in musical chores even today. And they say, Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulallah. This is said in a musical form, in a musical rhythm. Why it is stated? Because it was a Buddhist practice. When Buddhists were praying, they were praying in a musical chorus. And these Buddhists, when they got converted, which is stated in Tuhfatul Ahbab, many other works, in fact, which were written in Sanskrit as well as Persian works of that time, that clearly says that when there's a debate between the Sayyids, one talking to other and asking him that, look here, yesterday they told they are accepting Islam, but today they are again reading the Awrad in a similar kind of fashion. We're not able to train them well. Those of them who are coming used to become Maulvis and, in mosques and so on. The other Sayyid says, even this is unfit, they have accepted. My point is, which Professor B.V. Singh very rightly said, basically we have a version of indigenous Islam. Islam was indigenized everywhere it went from outside Mecca and Medina. It was everywhere indigenized. The local traditions were loaded onto it, and they continue down to present day. If you want to have the best and the classic example, any Turkish lady which gives birth to a baby, after that they worship Mother Mary. Now they worship Mother Mary, but it was traditional Mother Goddess that they used to worship. They do it even today. If you go to some of the Iranian villages in Iran, you will see what Hindus say, Gayatri and Jenu. They also have that, because they want to preserve the real Aryan traditions. But yet, they are Muslims. Because the mystics did not find any contradiction in accepting Islam and also in accepting the indigenous tradition. You see, as late as 19th century early, heretic Islam in Kashmir, in any other region, is very strong. I'm sure in UP also, when you go to Khanka, the ladies who do not have child or want to take blessings, they go to Dargah and they on a stone and so on, and they touch it, and then they, you know, massage themselves or touch their own and bow in reverence to all the Sufis when Urus is conducted in different places. I have seen it personally. And when you compare that and this, you find the Sufi saint who very rightly said, Kashtagane Khanjere Taslim Ra, Har Zamaz Gab Jane Digarast. That after every moment, even if we die, there is a new life. That is what indigenous mysticism says. But Quran would say there is no birth. There is a Qayamat at the end. While as here you do find that there are references to birth. You see the mystic tradition. We had a very, very famous Muslim saint in Kashmir. Professor Kohl Saab knows very well, Wahab Khar, Shamas Fakir. There is a battalion of these Sufis in Kashmir, poets who were not literate that they could write, but people preserved their sayings during their own time. It came to us, in oral tradition. And the Sufi saint says in Kashmiri, Khali Mansoor Mali Gomut Yattane, Tali Petcham Sharichi Talwar me. He is a Muslim, 5 times praying, believing in Islam, but he is complaining to God that the condition of my life has become like a Mansoor. Al-Haj Mansoor. And the worst part of it is that Shara is standing on my head like a sword. Now, how do you explain these things? Khali Mansoor Mali Gomut Yattane Tali Petcham Sharhichi Talwar me. And he is revered by Muslims like anything in Kashmir. Even personally, as an atheist, I would say I would bow before him. He is held up, held so high esteem by public in Kashmir. You can imagine. Basically, we find that these people who had dented into Kashmiri society, they very carefully knew, because they had been traveling for millions and millions of years. You go back to 4th differences how people from Punjab, Kashmir, mainland India are going to learn about the iron technology. People who were visiting from this part of the world to the Indus region were communicating, were meeting people from various other worlds from Central Asia. There was a communication going on between Indians and Central Asians. When I say Central Asians, I lump those colonies together because in each one of them you have some indigenous tradition or the other. In fact, when I was in Turkmenistan, on the invitation of President Niyazov, his secretary Muhammad Ajdukdev took me around and said, you must visit this shrine. I said, what is there? He said, there was a great Sufi saint under the chinar tree. He is no more, but your wishes would be fulfilled. If you go there, you don't have to pay any money. You just bow your head and accept Islam. I can tell you, plentiful, you can see how people looked at it. I went to a mosque in Turkmenistan where the mosque is constructed by Pakistani government as a part of mission, religious mission and diplomatic mission also. Myself and JNU geography professor Qureshi, you can check it up with him. Both of us were together. And couple of more people, MP Raj Babbar and many others. We were taken to that mosque. When we visited, we thought that the Maulvi would explain to us how Islam came here, what is he teaching and preaching. He immediately put a dastarkhan in the mosque. In the meantime, Professor Qureshi came with doing masa and everything to recite the namaz. But the fellow told him, stop it for the time being. Let's have food first. Then Qureshi told him, look here, it's a mosque. It's not for serving food. He said, I don't know that because I was Politburo member in Communist Party. And when Russia broke away, I was given the post of Imam. Now, if these are the people, this has happened modern times. Even at that point of time, you also have certain versions. Technology has changed, but you have ideas and institutions very ancient and very old which have carried forward this tradition today. You look at in Persian or Urdu, you say naful. When you go to different places, you carry an alam. These days, this alam is very frequent because BJP also has an alam, yellow color and like that, fagwa. But you see, in medieval times, it would be a green color. That's not permitted by Islam. But in post-prophetess phase, we do find that such figures, with religious symbols were being carried in various directions as a propaganda and advertisement also. Coming back to Kashmir's case, when we look at Kashmir, we do find from 4th century AD, when Shaivism made its presence again, we find that there are battles taking place. Udambaras, Damaras, the modern Dars, revolting against the king very frequently. It is stated that when a Damara comes from rural area into the city, the people should shut their windows and doors. Nobody should be in a position to look at the Damara. Kalhana says that when the temple of Vejbor was destroyed, the cows were killed, and in Srinagar, away for 20 kilometers or more, you could hear how the cows were crying when they were being killed. That time it was not Muslim who was doing it. It was Harsha's period. It was 10th century AD. And John Raj says that people are easily fleeing to the location of Malichas and having tasting their food there. Because Malicha was not, as per Jonaraja, Muslim alone. They were Yavunas also referred, Greeks, Romans, everybody was referred as a Malicha who was not a Brahmin or who was not a Hindu at that point of time. On one side, we find that there was severe political divisions of which Kashmiris were completely fed up. If you look at the history of secular Agrahara, which was given, in fact, most of the cultivable land was under the Shaivite Acharyas. And this geography immediately changes when Turks declare themselves as faithful to Islam. Those who were the peasants of these Shaivite Acharyas, they en masse accepted Islam. They all accepted Islam. But they carried the indigenous baggage also within that. Worshipping mother goddess cults, believing in heretic traditions and so on. They continued for a long period of time like this and so on. In 14th century, when nephew of Chengiz Khan, when we say Chengiz Khan was Mongol, not a Muslim. Chengiz Khan's success has not been measured. His success can be attributed to the famine that took place, the plague that took place at that, because plague from China. China has been producing, as my guru says, gunpowder, plagues, and silk. So that time also there was a plague which came with, resin and spread to rest of the Asia, spread to European countries also as Black Death and so on. And then Chengiz Khan followed that and began to capture different areas. When his nephew came to Kashmir, we have authentic information. He took thousands of men and women belonging to all communities as slaves and sold them in the harems of Central Asia, Persia, Arab, Egypt, Europe, everywhere. And it is that point of time when these people are being taken away, the greatest bhakti saint of Kashmir, Lal Dedar Laleshwari. What did she appeal to public at that point of time? She would have said that you don't become Muslims, you don't become Hindus, don't become Buddhists or anything else. She stated, Shiv Shui Thali Thali Rozan Mauzan Hyunt Musalman Trukhai Chukt Pan Parznao Saiche Sahibas Sidzanizan. Shiv Shui Thali Thali Rozan, that means you see Shiva in everybody, because in 4th century AD, when Shaivism underwent reformation, the caste was first thing that we abolished. The central focal point of Trika philosophy is that Kashmiri Pandit does not believe in casteism at all. from 4th century AD. That's why Lalla says that Shiv Chui Thali Thali Rozan, that if you are accepting Shiva in everybody, you are surrounded by Shiva by every side. Don't differentiate between what is Hindu, what is Muslim, what is Hindu, or what is Islam. Trukhaichuk, if you are clever, if you are sensible, if you are sensitive, Pan Parzna, realize your own self. Soiche Sahib Sitsanizan, that's how you can realize God. Now, when a lady mystic, Hindu lady mystic, makes an appeal to public in such circumstances, what will people do? For people, it was irrelevant to think in terms of Islam or to think in terms of Hinduism. Because this practice today, so and so has become a Muslim, so and so has become a Hindu, there will be commotion and all. It's post colonial practice. It's not pre colonial. Because it's post colonial version, it has been fed to us, but it's not pre colonial at all. So, therefore, that was also the reason for turning away from Islam, turning away from Hinduism towards Islam and accepting Islam. You see, attributing it simply to Sayyids, I wouldn't accept that. Because if you read Tariq Rashidi page, I think 356, there's a big footnote, and Ilyas and Dennis and Ross have translated it. If you look at Tariq Rashidi, it mentions very clearly that 700 of them who claimed to be Sayyids in Central Asia, Persia, when they wanted to migrate, before migration, actually, they were asked to ride a horse that was iron horse. In iron horse belly, you lit up the fire and make the whole iron red. And then asked these Sayyids, please come, you are considering yourself to be spiritual. Prove your spirituality, nothing would happen. When Sayyid Ali was asked, he immediately took a flight and left Kashmir. He came to Kashmir with 700 people, left Sabzwar and came to Kashmir. Because otherwise, the execution of Sayyids was also taking place in Persia, Central Asia. And then people say, because Sayyid Ali came, he wrote Zakirul Muluk, he wrote Gayatul Makan, and therefore dictated to Sultan Qutbuddin, Kulai Sharif, that is cap, and then said Islam, it should be done this way, it should be done this way. It was not like an Indian constitution to be accepted and applied. It was not like that. It was a hodgepodge at that point of time. Because there was not one nationality, one community. When you look at, interesting thing was that the tradition of Sanskrit culture in Kashmir had only one advantage, that it had given Kashmiris a superiority complex. Today we say, from politicians, they say Kashmiriyat kharab ho gaya, Kashmiriyat ye ho gaya, but they don't know what is Kashmiriyat, if you ask them. The Kashmiriyat is that superior complex where anybody goes from mainland India or anybody comes from Central Asia, China, and then he accepts his local position as a superior. Jahangir, with such a grandeur of Mughals, going and saying that Kashmir is Jannat-e-Benazir. If there is a heaven on earth, it is here in Kashmir only. Buddha going from all the way to Kashmir and saying that if anybody can, because Buddha's third disciple and third World Buddhist Conference was held at Arhatvana in Harvan. He goes, he says, if any place is there where you can pursue spirituality, in India, it's only Kashmir. So therefore, the tribes, the communities that came from Central Asia, they also subordinated their culture to what was evolving as a multicultural society in Kashmir, in fact, and considered that as a superior force. These Turks contributed to that in the beginning, because they were the ones who brought people from different versions, different areas, different communities, and made them to accept this new religion for economic reasons, as I said. For economic reasons, for material reasons, not for religious reasons. Because if it was religious reasons, then Aurad would be defined, in fact, in the way it is done in various other Muslim countries. Then a Kashmiri poet would not protest against Shariat and say like that. And the Sufis who gave, if you compare the version of Sufism and Bhakti when it runs parallel to it, in fact, or Paramartha Abhinav Gupta, or, Adhyatmikta as we say. You count those all principles. In Islam, they say ikhlaq, we say sanskar. Shunya, nothingness, for example. Contentment. You see, contentment is the foundational principle of Sufism. And if you look at Rig Veda very clearly mentions the general impression that some of our friends have that, oh, now I have retired, I will have a moksha because I will pray and do only religious activity. No, you will not get moksha. Moksha, as for Rig Veda, is simply basically when you have the feeling that sufficient is, enough is, small is sufficient, less is more. That is moksha, when you are contented with what you have. And these principles are well laid in mystic tendencies in India. You see, Quran is being perceived without reading. We have Shafis. First we have Sunnis, Shias. Then you have Shafis, Hanbalis, Malikis, Baha'is, Wahhabis, Ahmadiyas. And I would say nowadays, because in certain sections of Muslim society, now Jamaat has their own version to produce. I think that is what has brought sometimes conflict within various sections of Muslim society at different points of time. In Indian context, I would say this is also a wrong notion. If we en masse say that all Indian Muslims are like this, they are like that. No. I mean, if they have their own attire, if they have their own taste for different kind of, feelings, that necessarily does not mean that they are anti-national. Because if you read Quran mentions that each Kashmiri, each Indian should also know. One of the foundational principles of Islam is وَالْكَازُلْ مِنَ الْغَازَ وَالْأَفِنَانِ النَّاسِ. This is written in Quran. Those of us who say Muslims are violent, I think please remind your friends, وَالْكَازُلْ مِنَ الْغَازَ وَالْأَفِنَانِ النَّاسِ. That if you have little anger also, please absorb that. You are not allowed to express your anger so that it does not hurt public sentiment. It is stated in Quran. But unfortunately, some of the Maulvis do not preach it publicly to tell public that we are here to spread peace. We are an integral part of India. We are not from any other planet. We also have the same taste. We have also the same thirst. We have same aspiration. And we have same God. You belong to Banaras, you see the way the great maestro of Shehnai used to say that early morning he gets up and the first lesson he draws, he's singing it or reciting his Shehnai for the sake of Vishwanath. So therefore, the conversions in Indian environment did not take place under simply threat or because of temple destruction or because of any other thing. There are historical reasons, there are economic reasons, there are cultural reasons, there are many other reasons which I will state in my paper when I hand that over to my friend Professor Kalam or Professor Singh Sahib here. But I would like to mention one thing, that once, I was having a lot of time. And my wife asked me that because you are posing irreligious always, you better study religion. I took 1.5 years. Studied Upanishads, studied Vedas, the Kashmiri Nilma Purana, and many other. Then when after a year she came, she said, what is that you said? I said, तेरे शहर का माई कदा चाहता हूँ, मैं पीने से पहले नशा चाहता हूँ, विहारा कलीसा हो मंदिर या मस्जिद में हर दर पर अपना खुदा चाहता हूँ. With these words, I thank all of you.